And after listening to your last podcast about the drama triangles, I think we realised that we, in fact, need to go back and say, can we have this explained even more clearly?
Be the creator, not the victim, yeah?
Yes.
So. With the granny flat, so is the builder going to use the same methodology of panelising it to then build it?
Yep. Yes, okay. It is. So it's going to be, highly insulated and all of that.
And with an HRV, heat
recovery. Little HRV. And so but there are things that will happen that won't happen in the house. So, for example, in this little laundry that we hadn't expected to use, we're going to put in our old washing machine and dryer. And I said to him, we'd like it to be vented outside, but it doesn't work with Passivehaus. And he said, well, remember, it's not going to be certified, and the house will always be, of a higher quality in terms of thermal performance, that, even if you have that vented to the outside. So, that's how it's working. So, yeah. I think it's a good thing. I did worry about the price, but I think it's a pragmatic choice in a way.
I think too, given the fact that it may be somewhere that you do end up living, based obviously on the configuration of accommodation in the house and your physical fitness and those kinds of things, the point that aesthetically it's going to work in keeping with their home, design-wise and planning-wise it's going to work, and you've been able to design it from scratch so that you can get those level, entries and transitions between the two in where you need to, and then to have it be thermally comfortable. And I think then to obviously Passivehaus has to be, for it to be certified, has to be 0.6 air changes per hour, whereas there's a lot of research now showing that if you can achieve kind of around 3 to 5 air changes per hour and have that recovery ventilation in it, then that's a dramatic improvement on what traditional construction is. So you do have a bit of buffer for the granny flat to still be really well performing.
Yes.
Is the builder still going to blower door test it and see where it's at?
No.
They're not? Okay.
I don't know. We haven't discovered
that. Yeah. So
well,
I'm a great fan of the red door test.
Yeah.
I like the idea.
It may not happen because our PHPP consultant, he'd probably charge to do to do that test on the granny flat. So that's not something we've discussed. But maybe it's not necessarily necessary.
It might be interesting just to have the conversation, because depending on obviously how they're scheduling it, if they're planning on doing all of the panel erection and glazing fit out all at the same time, based on and so it will be a closed envelope around the same time as the house. You might find that if the blower door test is already mobilised on site, it's not like paying for a second blower door test to get it done.
No, that's true.
It could just be a good reckoning for you if you are venting that laundry to the outside, thinking about whether you want to have dampers in that ventilation so that, it's not just uncontrolled air movement in and out, but it only extracts, it only opens when it extracts. There's things like that, I think. And
that's a good thought.
Yeah, I think too that obviously getting it tested just gives you some data, so it is that thing of if there is anything that they can fix. I imagine, given that this builder is a Passivehaus builder, they'll have processes and methodologies in place to try and really make it as airtight as possible.
Yes.
But you will, and they're doing all the things like you're obviously having the ventilated cavity and you're doing the mechanical recovery ventilation. So the building envelope's already being built to mitigate any risk of condensation and all of that kind of stuff. But I think for your own peace of mind, just to have a number against where that house is at means that there won't be any mystery for you. So, and you might find it's not like paying for 2 blower door tests. So it would be
okay.
Have the conversation about it. So, and then if any improvements need to be made, at least the builder will have that data to work with as well. So,
okay.
And I was
just going to say that also in the questions you asked about things that might have gone wrong. The thing that's been exercising everybody's mind, from the builder and the architect and the hydrologist and us, we're a bit more in the dark, is about stormwater.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had various stormwater proposals, and one of the problems is that our stormwater for our block, I'm pointing to the block, sorry, has to go across this block that we're on, where the old family home is, and then through somebody else's, where there are easements.
Yes.
But what's been discovered is that the stormwater connection pits on this block that we have to connect up to have actually been put in about 290 millimetres too high. Okay. And it has an impact on how we're going to get rid of water on our block that we're building on.
Yep.
So that's one of the problems. And another problem has been, well, because of that, we were going to have two big tanks that were going to collect stormwater. And where we were going to have them is at the bottom of the block, but because they need to be raised high on concrete pads in order to, get this fall, which was going to be a, great big eyesore in our backyard. And then we were going to put them up the back, and there was no room up behind the granny flat. And so it goes on. And so the latest iteration of the plan is that the hydrologist suggested something, and I don't even know entirely how to pronounce it. You know how to pronounce it in German, but Bund or Bund, Bunt, you said in German, is in the backyard to make Bunt or Bund, which is sort of like an in-ground retention thing with a little wall, so that all that surface water can drain into the connection pits. And it's all a bit of a mystery to us, and I even found myself on the internet in a lecture given by somebody in an Indian university on constructions of bunts or buns and what they mean, and I still can't entirely get my head around it. I like it, the idea, sort of better than having great big tanks stuck somewhere. Apparently you can have it lawned, so it'll still look like lawn in the backyard, but we're a bit a bit in the dark. And after listening to your last podcast about the drama triangles, I think we realised that we in fact need to go back and say, can we have this explained even more clearly?
Be the creator, not the victim, yeah?
Yes.
So,
I mean, I did learn, when they said that these stormwater connection pits on this block of land were 290 millimetres high, I went down and had a look, we both did, and I could not work out where you measure it from what to what. And so when we had the builder and the architect and the supervisor here, they gave us a very good, clear lesson on relative levels and
Fort Denison
in Sydney Harbour, which was a whole new world of knowledge to me.
That's awesome.
And I thought it was really interesting, but this Bund idea is a bit of a mystery. So
yeah. So do you know what happens when it rains really? Like, do you have problems with flooding and overland flow and water ponding on the sites? Is that something that you've seen during big torrential storms?
Yes, the soil's very porous.
It's sandy.
But was it 2 years ago when all of that big rain happened?
Yep.
Also, our neighbours have very thoughtfully set up their sheds so that their water sort of comes into our place.
Oh, jeez, yes. So we do get a lot of water running.
It's quite a bit of overland water.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, this is the thing, is what council requires at a base level is that everybody manages their stormwater on their site. And so you can, there's lots of incidences where neighbours will do building work and all of a sudden your water situation will change because then, of their water situation has changed and they're not necessarily managing their stormwater on their site as effectively as they could. So there are pathways if anybody does have a neighbour that does that you can sort of, see if you can speak to council to see what was resolved there and whether they've got any more responsibility to take better care of it on their site. It sounds to me like what the hydrologist is trying to do is figure out how do we retain water on your site in a way that slows down how it's needing to access the stormwater system, which is then when you start to look at retention pits, bunds, those kinds of things. And I mean, when you think about larger scale sort of parks and landscape works, it's where you start getting swales and sort of, reed beds and stuff like that are about basically providing water holding capacity so that in instances of torrential water events, the land has got the ability to kind of slow down the intake into the stormwater system. So you're not having, you've got that, the site's got the ability to hold water and slowly release it rather than bombard the stormwater system and then just flood and back up. So where it then starts to cause problems with your building works and that kind of stuff. So to me, there's a couple of really big positives happening for you. Firstly is that you've got this team working collaboratively together to try and come up with a situation or a solution that meets, it sounds to me like you've expressed some concerns about the aesthetics of the outcomes that they've proposed in the past. And so they're trying to work through that. I would never, ever, ever be worried about saying to somebody, look, I just don't understand what's going on here and I can't picture it. Can you please explain this to me more? And it sounds like your team is exactly the right kind of team to say, yeah, sure, totally. We can explain that to you. And then I think, have you had any landscape design help on your project yet? Because I know you guys are avid gardeners and you've sort of been, have you
we were going to. It got to be the stage where we were thinking that the money was going to be an issue, so we haven't. We should.
Yeah, I'm actually wondering if this would be an opportunity to speak to like a local landscape designer. And it could be that you even just go down to the local landscape centre and say, look, do you have anybody local that you would recommend? Or your architect might have somebody that they work with. But if you're going to have an expressed visible stormwater solution, it's going to be a landscape element. And so they could have a strategy for the above ground retention pits that means that they're a nice landscape solution. They could have a strategy for the bund that could be a nice landscape. But to have somebody with that design head helping to think about kind of a bigger picture of what this might look like could be a good investment of just some early conceptual input. And you might decide that that's all you need their help with. You just want to make sure that you get this right from an aesthetic point of view as much as from a stormwater point of view.
Yes, that's a good suggestion.
Yeah. So okay. Yeah, because the hydrologist and the builder are going to need to tick the boxes that council and the local water authority have on this. That's going to be their main goals. They're going to be obviously taking on board your feedback about your aesthetic desires, but if you're also not able to picture exactly what this outcome is going to look like, you're going to be limited in how much you can actually say to them, look, we don't want it to look like this, we want it to look like this. And so a landscape designer or a landscape architect can be a helpful kind of ally in navigating that as well.
Okay. And I think the other, so I will definitely do that. Thanks for that. The other thing in terms of a designer, I'm having trouble imagining how my kitchen colours are going to work. And you suggested a designer, or maybe I suggested, I can't remember.
Yeah, I know you were asking about an interior designer in the group, weren't you, about whether that was a good...
And I have to say, and I don't know why, but I'm sort of stuck in choosing one, and I'm just not quite sure how to get somebody who's right. I mean, I have used, once before when we were doing our kitchen in our old house, I had got a Dulux colour consultant, but I'm not sure if that's the sort of person I need.
Yep.
So I'm just not quite sure I really got to stop dithering and just do it, I think.
What's your architect done in terms of helping you select some of the interior finishes like flooring and that kind of stuff? And you mentioned that you've chosen tiles.
We've chosen tiles for the bathrooms, the same tiles, and we've chosen floor tiles, and we've chosen engineered black butt timber for the rest of the house.
Yeah.
And the architect was very good at finding a product that was, a good one and sustainable as much as possible and so, she's been fabulous like that. But I haven't quite been able to explain to her what I want, and probably because I'm not even quite sure how to explain it to myself.
Okay.
And I have chosen a bench top, and maybe that was the mistake because I've made that,
But do you love the bench top?
Sorry?
Do you love the bench top?
I think so.
Yeah. Okay. So
if that's sort of a bit problematic in an answer.
No, I think there's a couple of things. So one is, like an interior designer can be handy insofar as they can just help you narrow down your choices. So it's like going to the tile store and understanding that you had a selection that probably, like you said, made your choices simpler. I think that given you've chosen, like, the flooring is the biggest aesthetic stamp on the house.
Yeah.
From a color point of view, from a texture point of view. So the fact that you've chosen that means that you've already set in place a bit of a framework for what you want.
Yes.
And then that you've chosen the tiles as well for your bathroom. So, in Home Method, we talk about how one of the ways to get your home feeling like well-connected and holistic overall is to look at all of the internal and external finishes all in one place.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I don't know if it's possible for you to get some samples of the flooring that you've chosen and the tiles that you've chosen. Find somewhere that you can set up just a big board and stick those on them so that you can sort of see them. And then it could be that, yes, you could, and you've got your bench top as well, so you could get that. What are you doing in your bathrooms for your vanities? Have you chosen, do you need to just sort of pick finishes and bench tops for those as well, or are you choosing off the shelf vanity items?
That's something I'm not quite sure. I thought that that was part of the
Is it part of the joinery package?
Yeah, the joinery.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
And that's where I'm a little bit unsure.
Yeah. And so what are you finding tricky in terms of like locking in to an interior designer? What's kind of the hurdle?
It's choosing one because...
Have you had a chat to many?
No, I haven't had a chat to any.
But you're just looking at their websites and things like that, are you? And finding it a bit tricky?
Yeah. That's why I thought I had it on, the Home Method, so that I thought somebody, around Sydney might have found somebody they really loved.
Yeah.
And because...
Have you looked in the UA Army at some of the interior design listings that we have in there? Yeah.
No.
So if you have a look inside the UA Army, which is inside the Home Method platform, there'll be interior designers there who are aligned with the Home Method and Undercover Architect way, or that we know Home Method members have used. And so we've reached out to them and said, hey, do you want to have your details listed? So that can be a good way to go.
Okay, that's a good idea.
Don't feel that you have to work with somebody local. You can work with somebody remotely because they can show you stuff on screen and then they can put stuff in the post to you to help you make choices. Or they can say to you, this is the product I'm looking at. You head to your local Dulux Colour Centre, or you head to your local Bunnings and you can grab the Laminex sample or, the paint colour sample as well. What are you doing your kitchen joinery in? Like, what's in the pricing at the moment? Do you know if it's 2-pack or it's laminated?
I think it's going to be Laminex in terms of the joinery because it was a bit slightly cheap. Polyurethane was more expensive than Laminex. And we did go into town to the big Laminex showroom and they were helpful. And it seems to me that Laminex is, having a big push to, to have more sophisticated images, an image that's more sophisticated than, the builder said.
Yeah.
do you really want Laminex? You know, you're building this beautiful house. Do you think Laminex ties in? And I thought, well, you know, it's what we can afford, really.
Oh, and
You
it's
know.
super durable, and they do have
Yeah.
lots of really lovely finishes. And I think if you get, my suggestion would be, and I'm not sure what's priced, but getting the ABS edging rather than the Laminex edging,
Oh, is that the one that it
which is
gets
the
moulded?
ABS is sort of like it's like a plastic edging on it. And that to me is a much nicer edging than, and I sometimes play with that ABS edging. I will sometimes do it. They've got one that looks like ply. So you see the strips of the ply on the edge, or I'll pick like a contrast color like a silver or a black or something like that rather than trying to pick a matching color. But you can have a chat to the Laminex people and have a look, or you can have a chat to your cabinet maker about it as well, and see what their suggestions are. The ABS edging I find more durable long term. You don't get this weird kind of when you have a Laminex edge
that little
on the
line.
where you
Yes.
sort of see, and that I think that's the thing that Laminex has suffered from, is people have lived in kitchens that have then been from the 70s and 80s and 90s where the edging has then flipped up, you know, and you
It
start to
does,
see the
yes.
chipboard in
We
underneath.
have that
Yep.
here.
Yeah.
We have that here in this old house. The thing is that I think that the Laminex edging that we're going to have is the Laminex is going to be moulded, you know,
Yep.
into, I think, which of course is more expensive.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
and so we're doing that in the kitchen, but not
Yes.
in the rest of the house.
Okay.
So
And what bench top have you chosen?
a Decton,
Okay.
a Decton bench
The
top.
porcelain. Yep. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So to me, I reckon if you put down, sorry, just to go back, do you have any idea about the color palettes that you're drawn to, or
I'm
were you
always
thinking?
drawn to natural colours, natural yes, things. So I had ideas of the things I love. I love those kitchens that are bit Japandi, or you know, those ones with it, but not wanting it to look like a 1960s or 50s kitchen. But I also don't want it. I don't want it to be all timber or anything. We've got an island bench that has a curve in underneath, and it's
Yes.
going to be lined in wooden strips of black butt. So
Yes.
that will look really smart, I think.
Yes.
So I sort of
You're
imagine.
going for a greenish.
Yes, it's
thing,
sort of
aren't
a grey green.
Yes.
But you know, I have to be careful that it doesn't all sort of look too muchy. I don't know. I'm obviously, you talked about being confident. I am so not confident in this, Amelia. This is
This is the point though, because, and I think what happens is when you've never done this before, these are the finishes that you can touch and feel and that you know you'll be interacting with on a day-to-day basis. Whereas when somebody says to you, hey, pick a cladding or pick a window frame, you're kind of like, oh, it just feels like a big building product to me. Whereas like the tap I'm going to be, you know, touching, or the bench top I'm going to be cutting things on, or the cupboard door I'm going to be closing, that's something. And because you can walk into a showroom and you can pick up a color sample and you can walk back out, it feels a lot kind of a lot more overwhelming, just the amount of choice that's available, and trying to get it to piece it all together. So I think that, you know, my suggestion would be check out the UA Army for potential interior designers that you can work with. Collect together the samples that you do have and that you've locked in, because they will help that interior designer have an understanding of the kind of thing that you're looking at. If you haven't done any kind of have you seen any images online that you like or anything like that? Have you spent any time?
Oh yes, I have. I have seen them, but I can't quite make it work in my head. And partly I wonder if I've chosen too early the Decton colour, and you know, it hasn't been built. It hasn't it hasn't been bought. So
what was it that drew you to it? Why did you choose it?
I think we went to the Decton's showroom. I mean, we've been to all these places, and I think there was something that I liked about it, and I thought that would fit in. and I didn't like all the others. But, you know, I don't even have to have decked on. I know it's quite expensive. So maybe...
Well, there's an opportunity there for you to say, okay, well, look, this is the kind of thing. Like, obviously, I think that because you picked it, there's some aesthetic attraction to it. And so you can brief the interior designer and say, look, I'm not wedded to this, but it is along the lines of the kind of thing that I was thinking. And then these are the images of other stuff that I like, but I just can't apply them to my kind of finished home, you know. So and they can obviously look then at the architectural form and the aesthetics of the external finishes. And really, it sounds like all you're needing is your joinery colours, potentially your benchtop colour, what you might do on your splashback, and then the same thing with the vanities in the bathrooms. And, you know, with vanities in bathrooms, you can do them as a complete copy of whatever you've done in your kitchen and just do exactly the same materials, or you can choose tones that are darker or tones that are lighter, or you can choose contrasting tones. And it might be that you want to do your ensuite in something. You know, we've had homey methods that have done really dramatic statements in their en-suites because they knew it was kind of their bathroom. They wanted to have, you know, something that was really personal, or, you know, right across to choosing something that's very subdued. So, and then, I mean, I know, I'm trying to remember which member it was, but somebody chose a tile for their laundry that's got drawings of dogs on it because they fell in love with it at the tile store, and the person who was serving them said, look, it's in your laundry. You're going to be the one that gets to see it. Have some fun with it, you know. So
which is a good bit of advice, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, go for what you like. You can always replace them 20 years down the track if you're sick of dogs.
So, and I think you've got to smile when you walk into your laundry because
I didn't say, you asked me what was in our house. I forgot to say the other room in our house is a combined laundry bathroom.
Yes.
That was the other room. Yes.
Okay. Gotcha. Awesome. So, so I think that you've done more towards choosing your interiors than you possibly realize. And I think that you've also invested, you've gone further down the track. Like you say to me, oh, look, I'm confused and I'm not quite sure, but I think that you're further down the track of making the decisions than you realize. And when you're working with the right person, that's going to be, I think it'll come together quickly.
Yes.
And the fact that you've chosen a couple of really key finishes is going to help tailor in those decisions faster.
And I do have examples of, you know, all those things, the bench top, the timber, you know, strips, the possible tiles, all of those things, just trying to work it out. It's just I need to be able to pull it together. And yes, I need somebody's expertise. That's what I need.
Yeah.
Yes.
Awesome. You've also got cost points too, which is super helpful for narrowing down those decisions as well. So that's going to be really brilliant. Alrighty. And I think too, you know, that was one of the questions that we had about the decisions around your selections and that kind of stuff. So I think too, ensuring that it also is in alignment with that long-term durability, which the Laminex I think is a really good performer for that. And the, you know, Decton or a similar kind of bench top is a really good performer from that point of view. And low maintenance, you know, the accessibility kind of requirements, that sort of stuff is all super, super helpful.
Yes.
So can you share with us, because I know that you actually popped it in the group, that you had a sod turning ceremony on site.
Oh, that's right. So
which just sounded like a lovely rite of passage. Yeah. So
this was Landon's idea.
What was that about, Landon? What did you do that for?
Well, I think there should be sort of ceremonies. I like the idea of sticking a tree on the roof when the roof goes on and all of that sort of stuff. So we had a sod turning ceremony, and that broke up the guy on the digger. He cacked himself, and so it's just it
was very
down there, and the builder, and we
and the architect.
No, she wasn't there.
Wasn't she? Oh.
And a sort of a stainless steel spade.
Oh, and the building supervisor took some photos, and so it actually, when Landon sort of raised this with the builder. The builder said, "Okay, we'll do that." And so we were all out there at the crack of dawn, and it was freezing, and it caused a bit of merriment, really. But it does. A ritual is sort of quite powerful somehow. Yes, I'd forgotten about that. You see, all that's gone into the background.
No, I absolutely love it. So, is there anything else that we haven't covered or that you wanted to chat about?
I don't think so.
No, you've been a good help on this this last part. It's the colouring and stuff. Our daughter said the other day that not to choose a colour of tiles or painting the cupboards and things too close together, because it looks like you sort of were trying to match it and didn't quite succeed. So
yeah, if you're trying to, it is interesting, because things like you do see a lot of designers doing very monochromatic kind of fit outs, and it can work. But you've got to examine the different finishes in different light conditions, because, a green tile can throw all sorts of shades in the same way that a green piece of Laminex can. And if they're side by side and you're getting one throwing blue at the same time another one's throwing brown or something like that, when it's supposed to look like a green kind of hued kitchen, then that's when you can start to have that jarring sort of effect. So the benefit of you having, I think you've got a little bit of time up your sleeve. And so being able to get somebody on board, get those finishes all in a place where you can kind of look at them all together, and then you can look at them in different light conditions. What's it like at evening time? What's it like first thing in the morning, in the middle of the day? You'll start to see how that works. And I think when you've got a timber floor and you've got timber battening on your island bench, I think that you've probably got the opportunity to do quite flat finishes for your colours. Like, you're choosing a colour palette rather than a texture palette, I think. So
yes,
and from what I hear from what you're saying is you don't necessarily, a lot of people will lean right into all of the natural textures and they'll play off all the natural textures against each other. From what I see of and what our conversations have been like, I don't think that that's what you're seeking. I think you're seeking tones that are inspired by nature, and you've got natural materials within that palette, but you want to make sure that the natural materials aren't trying to be mimicked by textures or pretend materials in other places. And so the fact that you're investing in timber battening and, you've got that engineered flooring, to me, then there's a couple of Laminex do have a couple of really lovely soft grey-green colours. That there's one called Spin Effects, which is actually a colour that I particularly like. And they've got, and you might find that you could do, something like a lighter, paler green in the kitchen, which I imagine is going to be a really lovely light-filled space that looks out to the courtyard space. And then you could go maybe a moody, darker green or something like that in the bathrooms, which is sort of a more intimate area. And it's not necessarily being about sort of this bathed in light kind of experience. So, but putting them all together on the board will help you ensure that they're going to resonate with each other, and that, as you're moving from room to room, you're not sort of jarring it, kind of, jumping from a brown room to a green room to a yellow room, kind of thing.
Yes, no, we definitely don't want that. Yeah.
And then I think too, that will help you choose your paint colours as well. So figuring out what you're going to do your internal paint in, whether you want to change paint colours in different rooms. You're going to have your skirtings, your walls, your ceilings, all of that kind of stuff as well.
Well, it's interesting that the architect says that she always specifies, I can't remember, a white. I can't remember what white it is now.
Yeah.
I thought, that's interesting. I thought we got to choose colours.
You will. You can always say to her, no, we'd prefer to do that. But it is, I found that as an architect, there was always a white that I found just worked with pretty much most palettes.
Yes.
For me, Dulux Whisper White is always like an easy go-to, because it works with lots of different
I think
whites.
the one she uses is Lexicon. I think that's...
Yeah, so Lexicon can be quite blue and cold.
Right.
So, and we've had some home...
go with that floor.
Yeah. So, and we've had some Home Method members mention that lately. They've been, I think somebody tried out Lexicon. You can do Lexicon quarter and it won't be as cold, but it is a colder white.
Yes.
But yeah, in the Dulux range, the Whisper White's always an easy one. Chalk USA is also a good one.
We've used that in our oven.
Yeah, but I think when you do have a black butt floor, you want a white that's got a bit of body to it, so it will have a little bit of a tint. So yeah.
Okay, so that we hadn't sort of got round to that, but I thought, we'll choose our colour.
Yeah,
but white, because we have a lot of artwork. You know, we want it to be the background.
It's Chalk USA a bit yellow in the.
It can be a little bit when it's sitting next to certain products. Yeah, so it's definitely worth. And I think that's the thing, like you can go onto the Dulux website. I mean, of course, you can walk into a Dulux store and you can get the swatch, but also on the Dulux website, you can order bigger A4 size brush outs. And so you can get like a bigger sample without you having to buy a sample pot, you know, and painting and all that kind of stuff yourself. And then you can at least have those kind of bigger things sitting beside, you know, your products and that kind of stuff. So, and just make sure that if you do pick a Dulux color, that you then choose a Dulux paint to paint the walls with. Don't get the builder to use like if the builder's going to use Taubman's to paint with, then choose a color from the Taubman's palette, because it's always really tricky color matching. You know, they do a pretty good job of it, but if you've agonized over choosing a particular color, you want to make sure that's the color you're going to get. There's no surprises.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, that sounds
awesome. Good. I've taken up a lot of your time. Is there anything before we wrap up?
I think we've covered everything. I've got all these things that we sort of put together, but I think we've just about really done it, I think.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been so awesome to have this conversation with you. I know the listeners will love this update and everything that we've been able to chat about. We've literally gone from macro to micro and back out again. So we've covered lots of things. So it's been so lovely to catch up with you, Jan and Landon. And I'm so looking forward to seeing more of your updates as construction unfolds. It's going to be really exciting.
Oh, thanks, Amelia.
Thanks, Amelia.
We've enjoyed it too.